In this Elden Ring video, I'm going to be showing you my Rime Ronin build, which is a samurai build that focuses on the setting of the Frostbite status effect. And this can be used in New Game Plus as well as most of the regular game as well, and I'll be showing how you can play both ways in this video. So first up, let's take a look at the weapon we're using for this build. We're using the Nagakiba here. I really like the range of this weapon. It also has native bleed buildup, which is fantastic. And you can get this very, very early on in the game, so if you're playing this build from, the new game perspective, it doesn't take very long to get this. And what I've done here is I've set it to the cold affinity using the Chilling Mist Ash of War, which can be found in Carrion Manor, which isn't too far into the game. You could beeline it there and get this pretty quickly. If you want to get it, you would have to kill one boss in order to get it, because it's locked behind the boss there. But otherwise, it's not that far into the game before you can start playing this. And what I really like about this Ash of War is that it deals decent damage. It deals about 100% the damage of a regular attack. It's sweeping, so it can AoE through multiple enemies. It adds frostbite buildup in an area for a little bit of time, and it adds extra frostbite buildup to your weapon swings, which already have a decent amount because of the cold affinity. So it's not very hard at all to set the frostbite status effect with this build. Frostbite is a really good status effect, and it not only debuffs the enemy, allowing you to do more damage with your swings, but it also rips off a chunk of their health based on their max health. So the harder enemies are to defeat, the more damage they're going to take. So this is really good in boss fights or co-op or NG+, etc. It's very, very good there. And the downside to it is, unlike Hemorrhage, it can't be applied repeatedly without removing that Frostbite status effect by dealing damage with fire or just waiting for it to run out. So we've added a way to do that here. It's not the focus of the build, but that will increase your damage during certain fights. Also, what I really like about the setup that we have here is that, unlike Hemorrhage, this will trigger during regular enemy fights constantly. And what's really nice about that is enemies flinch for a second when they're triggered, the frostbite triggers on them, giving you an opening to keep swinging, or when you anticipate that that's going to happen, you can keep swinging without worrying about getting hit while you're in the middle of your R1 combo. And the other weapon we're using for this build is the black bow. This is a regular bow that operates the way a short bow does, meaning that you can jump in the air and shoot shoot again when you land instantly, which is fantastic for mobility, allows you to get arrows off a lot easier, and it's something you would see in a samurai build, I think. The samurai starting class actually starts with a katana and starts with a bow, so this is not too dissimilar from something you would see if you chose that. Now, the bow isn't the main focus of this build. It's there to augment your playstyle, give you a ranged option in a pinch, maybe thin out a couple enemies before you go in, kind of how you would play the samurai build, and also to use fire arrows, and this gives you a way to strip off that frostbite status effect and then be able to reapply it with another Chilling Mist sweep and attacks. So you can do this multiple times in a boss fight, ripping off 20 to 30% of their health. You can do this 2 or 3 times. You can also use bleeding arrows as well, or other arrows if you want, to supplement your damage depending on what you're fighting. Sometimes it'll make fights easier depending on what things are resistant to. But again, the bow is not the focus of this build. It's just there to augment it and give you some options when you're fighting. The armor set that I'm using for this build is the Zamora armor set. This is not something you can get very early in the game. This is found very, very far into the game. So if you're trying to put this build on early in the game, you're going to have to use some other armor set, maybe the samurai armor, if that's what you're starting the game as your class, which is fine. But I like the armor style of this. We're kind of going for a frost theme. Zamora is very frost themed in my opinion, and it's just more for the look of things than anything. But if you were min-maxing this build, you would probably wear heavier armor with better protection. You have the equip weight for it, or you could wear the body armor and use something like a Kina Mask, which will give you extra dexterity, which will increase your damage. So there are things you can do with this build to min-max better than what we're doing here, but I'm sort of going for that fashion style, which is why I'm playing the way I am. But if you want to min-max, definitely go with a heavier armor, more poise, and still stay in that medium roll range if you can. When it comes to talismans I'm using for this build, we have the Bull Goat's Talisman here. This is to hit the 51 poise breakpoint because of the armor that we're wearing. If you're using a different armor that's heavier, that's got better poise, then you won't need to use this and you can free up the slot again. That would be a better way to min-max this, but because I like to use different armor sets, and really this is one of the better ways to use one of these armor sets is to still hit that poise breakpoint, then this is what I chose here to put in the first slot. Beyond that, we have the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia and Millicent's Prothesis. Millicent's Prothesis gives you 5 extra dexterity, which is great for damage, and both of these increase your damage as you swing over and over. When you get into melee range, a lot of times when you're playing this build, you're just going to R1 spam, trying to trigger Frostbite, trying to trigger Bleeding, and to try and boost your attack power so you can deal even more damage. So these are really nice to have here. And in the last slot, there are really a couple ways you can go. Shard of Alexander will boost your Chilling Mist attack if you hit with the blade, which is nice. You can go with the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman in order to get more protection, because you don't have like the most protection set, so that's not bad. Or you can go with something like Lord of Blood's Exaltation, but I do find that you don't set bleeding that much with this setup because you just have like 38 or so bleed buildup per hit, and that's not a lot. Like, you're not going to trigger that regularly out on the landscape, and even in boss fights, probably going to trigger it maybe once because we're not focusing on bleeding. So it's a little bit more situational even than something like Shard of Alexander. Out of the three, the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman is probably going to give you the most effect, but if you're pretty confident in your dodging ability or you're not really dying much, Shard of Alexander is not a bad choice. Now, if you're playing early on in the game, you can get the Winged Sword Insignia in place of, Rotten Winged Sword Insignia and Millicent's Prosthesis. That one's going to be available to you. You can get the Warrior's Jar Shard if you kill Alexander, and then, as I've recommended doing, you can get someone to drop you the other one later on in the game if you want. That 10% damage from the weaker version will be useful the entire game, whereas Shard of Alexander is only really available for the last bit of the game. Other talismans that are good early on are the Green Turtle Talisman. This is a very stamina-hungry build. Chilling Mist costs a pretty good amount of stamina, and when you use Barrage with your bow, or you run and shoot, jump and shoot, or you just R1 spam with a Nagakiba, you chew through your stamina. So Green Turtle Talisman is not a bad choice as well. What I really like about this build, and something people have been critiquing me about, is it doesn't have a lot of buffs to it. Your buff, Chilling Mist, is actually an attack at the same time. You use it quite frequently in your combos and the way you're playing in your gameplay, so you're not constantly stopping to half the buff. And Chilling Mist was actually improved in patch 1.07. Its motion speed was increased, which is great, and the duration of the weapon's frostbite effect, or the frostbite it adds to your weapon, its duration was doubled from 20 to 40 seconds. So it's a lot more viable now than it has been previously, because you don't have to just constantly use it to keep your weapon buff. And I really, really like this. As you go around in the landscape, you just use the attack naturally on groups of enemies to get AoEs, and then you buff your weapon at the same time, and then, it triggers on regular enemies in about 2 swings most of the time. So if you don't kill something in one hit, you almost always trigger Frostbite, which is not something that happens with Hemorrhage, so that's nice. When it comes to attributes, we have 55 Vigor, 30 Mind, 19 Endurance, 18 Strength, 65 Dexterity, 50 Intelligence, 7 Faith, and 9 Arcane. We don't need any Faith or Arcane for this build, so disregard those. When it comes to Vigor, we have 55 here. This is enough for the period of the game for the beginning of New Game Plus, in my opinion. You should have plenty of protection with what you have here. It's not like a lot of protection. Between that and 55 Vigor, you're not going to die very easily. You probably want to take this up to 60 throughout New Game Plus, though. Mind is at 30 here, and you can get away with less Mind than this. Chilling Mist doesn't use that much FP. You're not casting any spells. You can absolutely get away with less Mind here if you absolutely want. But there isn't a ton of other places we need to put attribute points, and this allows you to skew almost all of your flasks to the HP side of things, allowing you to be a lot aggressive and not really worry about your flask count because you always have healing. Endurance is at 19 here, mostly for the stamina, but you can go higher, and probably going up to something like 30 isn't a bad idea. You could take a few points out of mine and put some in endurance, or as you level up from here, keep increasing endurance. This is the thing I would do next with this build. This will not only get you more protection if you don't want to role play a samurai with samurai type armor, or use the Zamor set, but it will give you extra stamina that will make attacking a lot easier, because you'll be able to spam without running out of stamina, which is what's going to happen to you if you have less than this. When it comes to strength, we have 18 here. This is the minimum requirement to use the Nagakiba one-handed. Sometimes when you're swapping back and forth between your bow and your Nagakiba, you don't have a lot of time to two-hand it before you need to get an attack off, and the damage increase isn't that much for two-handing when you have very little strength. So meeting that requirement for one-handing at 18 strength is nice. Dexterity is at 65 and Intelligence is at 50, and these are your damaging attributes here. The Nagakiba, the Cold Nagakiba, scales best with Dexterity up to 50, so you want to start there, get Dexterity up to 50. If you're playing a regular New Game build, you want to focus on Dexterity to get your damage up, if you're just talking about which attribute for damage. And then once you hit 50, you'll start focusing on Intelligence, and then once you get to 50 Intelligence, you'll focus on Dexterity once again. That's kind of the order in which things are scaled the best here. However, I do want to make a mention that if you want to play like a Spellblade build here, and you would rather have more Intelligence because you want to cast spells with this build, you could easily go 65 Intelligence and 50 Dexterity, or 75 Intelligence, 40 Dexterity, and you wouldn't lose out on that much damage. So that's totally up to you. That's not what I've done here because that's not the focus of my build, and I've already done a Spellblade type Samurai, but you absolutely could if you want. From here onward, I recommend increasing Dexterity and Intelligence. They'll give you about the same amount of damage at this point. So it's really up to you which one you want to pump, physical damage or magic damage. But you probably want to take both of those up to 80. And then if you know, by that point, if you're still playing with this build, you'll start increasing strength. Strength has the worst scaling, and you get like 1 damage per point if you're lucky. So it's not one I would recommend doing for a while, but when you run out of, hit 80 of those, then you'll want to focus on strength. And just a couple final tips before I wrap up this video. If you're using the Flask of Wondrous Physique, you got a couple options here. I like the one that recovers stamina because it's a very stamina hungry build, so keep that one in there. You can use the one that increases your magic damage, although it's not going to be as effective because you only do about 40% magic damage, but that is an option. Or you can use ones that increase the damage you do for multiple hits. That will give you more damage as you R1 spam. Or you can use ones that just simply increase your dexterity or strength, and that'll just give you, or intelligence, and that'll just give you a flat damage increase, which is nice. All of those are perfectly viable for this, and I'm not sure one is better than the other. And then when you're talking about which Great Rune to use, Godric's is probably the go-to here. You need Vigor, Mind, Endurance, Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence. Those are all really useful for this build, so getting 6 out of 8 attributes with that is absolutely fantastic. So that wraps up our video for the Rime Ronin. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I am back from the holidays now, so production on videos should go up. You should see more content. I am working on the Great Axes video. I'm hoping to have that out Friday for you guys. And I should have more regular builds as well, meaning we should go from about 1 build a week back to 2. At least that's what I'm hoping, except this week because we have the Great Axes video. And I hope to get some other content as well, so I hope you guys enjoy.